Happy New Year and welcome. So it's January 1st, 2026, and we're going to jump right in and take a snapshot of the Philippines by looking at the big headlines hitting the news today. What can these stories tell us about the road ahead for the nation this year? Let's find out.
And we're starting with a message of real optimism. This is from Vice President Sara Duterte's New Year's address. It's a call for a fresh start, urging the country to shake off the burdens of the past and just move forward with hope. It's a pretty powerful sentiment to kick off 2026. Okay, so a message of hope is one thing. But, as we all know, the reality on the ground can be a whole different story. So let's look past the New Year's greetings for a second and dive into the biggest stories that are really shaping the day.
First up, let's talk about something that hits everyone's wallet: money. Specifically, we're talking about the 2026 national budget. Now, this isn't just some boring spreadsheet. Think of it as the financial blueprint that's going to decide the country's priorities for the entire year.
And wow, is it a massive blueprint? The budget for 2026 is sitting at nearly 6.8 trillion pesos. To give you some perspective on that, that's about 22% of the country's entire gross domestic product. So as you can imagine, the debate around a number that big is, well, it's pretty intense. And that debate really comes down to two very different stories. On one hand, you have the government pointing to improvements, right? They're saying, look, we're live streaming budget meetings for more transparency. But on the other hand, you have critics saying, hold on, the process is still really opaque, and that the old pork barrel system, where funds can get diverted for political favors, is still alive and well, just hiding below the surface.
And when you dig into the details, you can see where the watchdogs are really getting concerned. They're flagging the social aid programs, or ayuda, as being wide open to political patronage. Then there's this huge 243 billion peso pot of unprogrammed allocations, which is basically standby money with no clear purpose yet. And on top of that, nearly 12 billion in confidential funds that have very little, if any, real accountability. So while all these domestic debates are heating up, international pressure is building too. As lawmakers are wrangling over trillions of pesos in Manila, a very, very different kind of tension is playing out on the nation's waters. Check this out. This is from a brand new report by the Chinese government about the disputed Scarborough Shoal. Beijing is now pointing the finger at the Philippines, accusing them of causing environmental damage to the reef and saying their fishing and intrusions are harming the ecosystem. But whoa, the Philippines is firing right back and fast. The country's Maritime Council spokesman is pointing directly to the 2016 International Tribunal ruling. He's saying, hey, that ruling found that it was actually China's activities, especially harvesting giant clams, that caused the damage. It's a classic he said, she said, but with massive geopolitical stakes.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Analysts believe this is more than just a simple disagreement. They have a name for this tactic. They call it lawfare. The theory is that by publishing this environmental report, China is trying to create a kind of legal justification, a legal cover, if you will, for its continued presence and potential occupation of the shoals. It's basically turning environmental concern into a strategic weapon. And this tension isn't just happening at Scarborough Shoal. The Philippines Defense Department just put out a statement saying they are deeply concerned about China's huge military drills near Taiwan. These exercises, called Justice Mission 2025, are seen as a real threat to regional stability. And remember, the Philippines' northernmost islands are less than 200 kilometers from Taiwan. Any conflict there could pull Manila in, whether it wants to be or not. All right, let's bring it back home. From geopolitics and high seas, back to the kitchen table. Our final headline for the day is about an issue that affects every single Filipino family: the price of rice. So, a really big policy change just kicked in today, January 1st. The government has officially raised the tariff on imported rice from 15% all the way up to 20%. Now, the idea here is to manage the market, but also, and this is critical, to protect the income of local Filipino farmers. So, where's all this imported rice coming from? Well, take a look at this. The dependency on just one country is kind of staggering, right? In 2025, more than 85% of the Philippines' rice imports came from Vietnam. And that over-reliance is exactly why the government is now pushing importers to diversify, to look at other places like Thailand and Myanmar. But all this begs a bigger question, right? Why can't the Philippines just grow enough rice for itself? Well, it's complicated. The challenges are really deep and systemic. You've got limited flat land for farming, you're constantly getting hit by natural disasters, and you're dealing with everything from high production costs to an aging generation of farmers.
not to mention the growing impacts of climate change. So yeah, becoming 100% self-sufficient is a really, really tough goal.
So when you pull all of these day one headlines together, what kind of picture does it paint for 2026? Well, it looks like a nation that's got to perform a very complex and very tricky balancing act. So here's the bottom line as we see it on day one. The Philippines is starting the year juggling three huge pressures. You've got the internal battle for trust over how the people's money is spent. You've got immense external pressure from these maritime disputes. And then you have that constant, everyday challenge of economic security, perfectly symbolized by the price of rice. And that leaves us with the big question for the year ahead, doesn't it? How does a nation balance all these forces? How do you manage your own internal resources and debates while at the same time facing down these powerful pressures from the outside? The headlines of January 1st have set the stage. The rest of 2026 is going to be about finding the answer.